My name is Jeff Norman. I was born in Lincolnton, North Carolina, down close to the Charlotte area. Um, I grew up in Lincolnton till I was 18. I went to Lincoln County High School. Uh, I was in elementary in Battleground, which is famous for a few wars, Ramseur's Mill Battle and things like that, and that took place in that area during the Revolutionary War. Um, Let's see, I went to high school in Lincolnton. I graduated high school in 2002 in Lincolnton, North Carolina. My mom, Dana Michelle Rourke, she is in Hickory, North Carolina right now. Her and my father live together, Tim Norman. Um, that's who my brother was named after. He's going to kill me for saying his full name, but Timothy Alfred Norman is my dad. They are both still living. They are in Hickory, North Carolina. Great people. My mother actually raised us three boys by herself. So we learned a lot from her. She taught us how to be productive people and not to rely on too many others. We kind of went through life taking care of her more than she took care of us, I like to say. I do. I have an older brother. He's Timothy Norman. He's in Boston. He just graduated with his PhD. I do believe it's in pathology. So pretty proud of him. I have a younger brother who's here in Johnson County. He's a half brother of mine. And I have another brother. He was hit by a car when we were in elementary school, and he was killed. His name was Bradley. And I have another brother, Chance, in Hickory, North Carolina, which he's just starting his way. He's 20 years old, so he's starting to learn his path and where he wants to go right now. Oh, let's see. I spent the summer running around fishing, having fun with my friends. August of the following year, 2002, I joined the Marine Corps. And that's where I began my military journey. Well, I actually joined the Marine Corps at 17. I signed into the early entry program, the DEP program. I did some training with them down in Gastonia, North Carolina, through my senior year of high school. So whenever I graduated high school, I already knew what I was doing that next August. So a lot of kids went to school, they went to college and things like that, but I left to go to the Marine Corps. I did. I was actually sitting in my senior year in Spanish class, and when the World Trade Centers were hit. And I was sitting there in class, already being signed up, and I said, I know what the next 4 years of my life are going to be like. So, well, you see the photos, you see the pictures, and you know, I've always known that I was wanting to be a part of the military. But then once you see those Marine pictures and you see those guys in the dress blues, you know what service you wanted to join. I reported to the Marines, Parris Island, South Carolina. That was 2002, August 19th of 2002. I remember that day very vividly. We spent a night in MEPS program. We took the long bus ride down, and I stood on those yellow footprints the 20th of August. I got lucky. I went from Parris Island to Camp Geiger, just on the other side of Lejeune, which is a training program. It's ITB. It's an infantry training battalion for the Marine Corps, the East Coast Marine Corps. I went there for about 3 months, and while we were completing our training there, we had one of our instructors came in, and he picked a handful of guys, and they were going to Lejeune. And then we had our names read off. I was a mortarman in the training, and we had our names read off, and he said, you lucky rats are going to Hawaii. So we got lucky and was stationed in Hawaii. I was a mortarman. I went to the Marine Corps in the infantry. 0341 was my specialty. I shot mortars, Pretty much the entire time I was in there. There was other times where we got moved over to machine gunners and things like that, but we were pretty good mortarmen. You know, we have squad leaders, and the way the squads are set up, that's one of their particular jobs is to make sure that you're firing in safe directions and your overhead clearance is good. So the mortars were fun though. Oh, I loved it. It was of all the other jobs in the Marine Corps, you know, the mortarman. I had talked to a few more before I had actually went into the training to be a mortarman. And they were all sitting around playing cards a lot of the time, so they had a lot of downtime. And but when it came time to work, they worked really hard. So you know, it kind of piqued my interest and take advantage of some of that downtime that they had. About 3 kilometers is what we did, which is about 3,000 meters. It's pretty much we were doing some training in. Where were we? We were in California, at Mojave Viper. We were doing some training out there. We were dropping mortar rounds into a stack of tires from about 2 clicks away. I did this all through my first deployment, where I went to Okinawa, Japan in 03. And then we went on a ship for a few months where we did the 31st MEU. Well, my enlisted period was 4 years active and then 4 years inactive. Deployment for Marines usually runs about 7 months, and that's either in combat or non-combat areas. So my first deployment was not in a combat area. It was to Okinawa, Japan, and then we joined the 31st MEU, where I had joined an operation. We were tactical recovery of aircraft personnel, which were short version. You know, the military likes to do their acronyms. So we called ourselves a TRAP team, which we were on standby for the majority of the time, waiting in case an accident with aircraft occurred. We would go out. Total Okinawa, I would say about 3.5 months before we went on the 31st MEU and finished out the rest of that deployment. We came home a little later in that year, home meaning Honolulu, back to Hawaii. Yeah. So we finished that deployment and came back. After Okinawa, my first combat deployment was Afghanistan. Okay. And I made that deployment in 04. Afghanistan was still early whenever I was there. It was early in the operations and things. You know, we had been over there for a short amount of time, but vehicle equipments and things like this, we rode mostly in high-back Humvees. Where if you're not familiar, it's an open top canvas back Humvee, and we had built a box to hold our mortar rounds. Our mortar rounds are about like that, high explosive. You have red phosphorus, white phosphorus for things. And we actually built a box on the back of the Humvee to where we could put our rounds in and then sit on top of that box. And we would do our vehicle missions like that, riding around. I've heard IEDs were one of the major threats in both Iraq and Afghanistan. And everywhere we went, we knew we were riding on a box of explosives. So if we were to be hit by an IED, it wouldn't have been good for any of us. We were fortunate to not get hit by an IED in Afghanistan. It's such a mixed emotion point. You know, everything and anything that could go through your mind goes through your mind, but at that exact moment, you start thinking of the guys to your left and your right, and you fall back on your training, and you know and understand the mission at hand. And that's, you know, that falls back on our commanders and the people who are in charge. You know, we don't get to meet everyone being in that platoon or that convoy. We don't meet everyone on the team. We don't meet the extended team members that we have. So we rely on those commanders, those people in charge who can command and control and keep our team together. We had quite a few. Afghanistan, we lost quite a few guys. A lot of it was small arms fire, things like that. We made contact with the enemy in the mountains and things like that. Caves are very hard and intricate things to clear. So, well, to clear from, of enemy personnel. So, you can see the dangers that came in that. Well, unfortunately, if the caves were open at the top, we could possibly drop some mortars in there. But hand grenades, things like that, you lead with. It was interesting to see. A lot of times there were other units and things that were there, our sister units that was close by. So, a lot of times in Afghanistan, you think you have the vastness of what is Afghanistan, and you think, wow, there's nobody even around us. But when you get on the radio and things start happening, it's amazing, where your sister platoons and things will come out of, and they're actually closer by than what you think. Communications were good and bad. After every mission we had a debrief, and communications always come up as the number one problematic area. But with the gear and equipment, the area that we were in, we were able to communicate. Well, they were still they had the capabilities of personal cell phones, things like that, which were making a big rise during that time. But I know a lot of their IEDs and things like that they would use, their weaponry was used or set off via cell phone. So they had that quick communications where we had our radios. It came close times. In Iraq, my vehicle was hit 3 times by IEDs. So where I was fortunate in Afghanistan not to have an explosive explode on my vehicle, Iraq I wasn't so fortunate in that aspect, but I wasn't injured during that, those explosions. I had one went off. I was actually looking out the driver window. I was at this time in Iraq. I was a corporal, E4. We were traveling the roads quite a lot. We were a mobile assault platoon. I was a part of a mobile assault platoon where I was the lead vehicle commander. I had a driver and had a turret gunner up top, which shot a 7.62 machine gun. I was looking out. We had a divot in the road, which looked suspicious. And I had my driver pull up, and we were looking with binos, the turret gunner and myself, where we're looking. We didn't see anything suspicious except for the crater that was already right there next to the road. And so we decided to go on, and I was looking out the window to see if I'd see anything. And the next thing I remembered was I woke up on my driver's lap, and my gunner had taken some shrapnel and asphalt debris to the face, which there's a considerable amount of blood and things like that, coming down. So after I regained my bearings and found out what was going on, we pushed through, we assessed the situation, we got the gunner, which was Matthew Patton at the time. We got him, bandaged up and sent him on a med flight out to the air base, to the nearest air base. We finished out. We checked each other out, myself and the gunner. We checked each other out, made sure we were all good. And when we found out we weren't, injured at that time, we stayed and provided security until we can clear the area. At this time, we had shifted to, we were still Operation Iraqi Freedom. This is after the second push through Fallujah. We were in the Al-Anbar province of Iraq, which is pretty known even to this day to still be a pretty hot area. But we were calming down. We weren't looking at a whole lot of enemy our forces against an enemy platoon or battalion-sized element. We were still fighting the IEDs at this time. They were hit and run type of missions that they were doing against us. So we were coming to the end, pretty much as what we saw as the end of the Iraqi war. We had air support on standby most every time we drove our vehicles outside the base. The dust storms and dust clouds and things like that, prevented a lot of aircraft from flying at periods, from time to time. But for the most part, we had air support. I was in Iraq 7 months. That was 7 months, same as Afghanistan, and the total deployment to Okinawa. I left in '06. The battalion that I was in, 3rd Battalion, 3rd Marines, my contract was coming up to its end. My EAS, my end of active service date was coming. So I extended my contract with the Marine Corps for 3 months. They said that I could extend my contract and deploy to Iraq, or I could not extend my contract and go to another unit and get out on time. But I decided to extend my contract and go on to Iraq with the guys that I knew and had basically grew up with, from 18 to at that time 20, 21 years old. So we decided to stay with them and finish out the fight. That was a different experience. Going into the Marine Corps after high school, I felt like it wasn't that I knew what was going to happen, but I felt like I knew what I was going to be doing. Coming home after the Marine Corps, I didn't really have an idea of what I was going to be doing. So that was kind of, it was a new scary. All the traveling that I had done in the Marine Corps, I was always happiest when I was coming back home or coming back to my barracks or after training and things like that. And I tell my wife still today, even after going on vacations or anything, I love going on vacations, but I like coming back home better. At the time, I didn't pay it any mind. I felt like I was living the best of my teenage years. That those times from 18 to 22 years old are the best times of my life, and I wouldn't spend them any other way, give them to this good country. So the first person that I came home to see was Mom. You got to come see Mom. It didn't matter where I was in the world. I'd always call back home. And Mom somehow knew. I don't know if she was talking to my commanders or just really paying attention to the movements, but she somehow knew where I was at all times. And it was interesting. But I couldn't hardly come home and surprise her because she knew when I was coming home too. But I think part of that was my excitement of coming home. I couldn't have kept it quiet anyway. Yeah. But the first person I came home, I left Hawaii November 15th, 2006. I came home, I was home by the 17th. That's when I came straight home. I seen Mom. She was living in Ashe County at the time. Seen her, and then I went to my grandmother, Linda, down in Lincoln. And from there, I kind of settled in, started working. Started going back to college, and I went to Catawba Valley Community College. I went there for a little while, and I was doing criminal justice. I was taking classes in criminal justice. And at that time, I'd only ever lived in North Carolina, except for stationed, with the Marine Corps. So I found out how Tennessee done their things about getting sponsored and being sent to the academy through an office or an organization. So I decided to leave the criminal justice doing the college classes, and I came over here to Mountain City, Tennessee, and I got on with the sheriff's department, and I've been there ever since. Well, I met my wife a few years ago. We've been married 3 years this July, so we've met about 4 years ago. Best thing that's ever come along. you know, she's the one who set up this the meeting
Yeah.
and stuff like that for me. And she's told me from the beginning. You know, we watch a lot of documentaries and things like that. And at the time, you know, I never paid any attention to the significance of what I did in my military time, and you know, the conflicts that we were in. And she tells me every day, you know, you're going to be one of these ones on the TV doing these interviews. You know, you need to start remembering these things. You need to get your dates, and you know, she's a big influence.
Yeah. Well,